Hi internet, Orc speaking, welcome back to the channel. Due to the fact that Mario Kart Wii is a fairly unrealistic game, what happens if you try to implement a realistic vehicle inside of Mario Kart Wii and still balance it to make it viable? So that's what I did. At least that's what I tried to do. Let's get into that a little bit. Basically what I found out is by modifying the files and the vehicles themselves, we could actually implement more driving styles than the 3 that are implemented inside of default Mario Kart Wii. Those being inside drifting, and outside kart drifting. Currently in statmod, there are 2 Corsa vehicles, which is the drift type that I'm going to be calling for these particular vehicles. The Corsa classification are vehicles that drift closer to a realistic racing simulator, whether those lines be drift or traditional. Now using this logic, we wanted to begin developing an F1 car, a vehicle that's very fast but has very little tuning capabilities. And what the result of that was the F1 car, or the Sprinter. Now what happened with the Sprinter was because it was such a new archetype, we didn't know how well to balance it. We didn't know whether it would be too good or too bad. So we played it safe, and it turned out that being safe was actually not so safe. By adding a high amount of speed, it became very, very difficult for the Sprinter to play particular tracks. And this means that on certain tracks, it was flat out broken, and on other tracks, it was completely unviable. Now real quick, let's pause for a moment of the story, and let's talk a little bit about how we made the vehicles inside of Mario Kart Wii handle closer to their real life counterpart. Inside of Mario Kart Wii, whenever you initiate a turn, there's actually 2 portions of it. There's the handling portion, which is determined by either not turning the control stick that much, or if you are at a low enough speed. And then there's the drift portion, which is what happens when you turn really sharp at a high speed. The variable can be changed to some degree, however, one thing I began to notice is about with every vehicle, that initiation point when you go from handling to drifting is about 58 km/h. Now what we did with the Sprinter is we made the handling much stronger than it normally would be. After all, in Mario Kart you rarely ever use the handling stat, and we changed it so instead of the drift normally taking a tighter turn than normal, which is why you would drift, we made the drift turn even worse. So even though you are technically drifting, we made it so that the drift simulates an understeer, which is what happens in real life when you're going too fast and you try to turn too sharp, and the momentum of the car keeps sending it forward without actually turning. As far as Mario Kart Wii goes, it's actually fairly realistic. However, even though we tried to play it safe, what ended up happening was the Sprinter became incredibly broken, becoming a very counterpick heavy vehicle online, which made it viable on tracks like Yoshi Falls, Peach Beach, basically any track that you did not have to turn, and it became completely useless on all the more complex tracks. So as much as I like the initial design of the Sprinter for F1, it just wasn't usable in Mario Kart Wii. So we had to cartoonize it a bit. So regrettably, we ended up nerfing the speed and buffed the handling by quite a bit. And this actually created a brand new problem. With the older version of the Sprinter, you would have to slow down around every corner. However, with the slightly slower speed and better handling, you would be able to take all of the turns in the game at pretty much max speed, which ended up being more broken than the initial Sprinter. Who would have thought? Around this time, we began to get complaints that the Sprinter was no longer fun to play, and the reason for this was the viable way to turn the vehicle was no longer by carefully soft drifting and holding the angle at the sharpest point, but rather rapidly tap the thumbstick one direction, which automatically made the vehicle turn at the maximum tightness. This made the vehicle very brain dead and boring to play, which was not good. So I went back to the board and gave the Sprinter an even better handling stat. That way tapping was no longer necessary. Now obviously the better handling means the more turns that the Sprinter was capable of turning, which means that the speed unfortunately had to be nerfed. And believe it or not, even right now it still needs to be nerfed. It's still way too fast, and it's still way too good. The Sprinter was a novel idea, however it was very clear that the Mario Kart Wii engine is not capable of sufficing the playstyle that I wanted to implement. So even though the Sprinter still can't take really sharp turns and handles close to an F1 car, there was definitely some limitations that you had to give and take with. Now I want to take your attention to the faraway land of Japan. Unless you live in Japan, then it may not be so far away. My younger brother, who is also a co-partner in developing this entire thing, is a big fan of Initial D, where instead of taking the traditional line, you're introduced to a new style of driving, drifting. Now Mario Kart Wii has drifting, heck, every vehicle could drift in Mario Kart Wii. But Mario Kart Wii's drift is very different than an actual drift in real life. And as me and my brother are both big fans of drifting in Assetto Corsa, a fairly realistic simulator, we wanted to implement a drift vehicle inside of Mario Kart Wii. as well. As of right now, the Honeycoupe is currently the newest addition to statmod, and after tuning some of the characteristics of the vehicle, the Honeycoupe is the official drift vehicle of Mario Kart Wii. We even disabled the Honeycoupe from competitive lounge because we expected it to be broken like the Sprinter. But surprisingly enough, at least so far, the Honeycoupe is quite balanced as it entails to the original idea that the Sprinter was supposed to do, and that's slow down around the corners. The Honeycoupe has to slow down around the corners. That's how drifting in real life works. But what this meant is even though the Honeycoupe is technically the fastest vehicle inside of Mario Kart Wii, it does not hit its top speed anywhere near as often as the Sprinter does. Now, if you've been paying close enough attention, you may have noticed that the Honeycoupe would have the same issues that the Sprinter had. Sure, it could take all the turns on the sharper, windier tracks, and you have to slow down so it's more balanced on the in-between tracks. But what about those tracks that you don't turn much at all? Very good point. And the solution to that was actually quite simple. We added a limiter to the highest acceleration point of the Honeycoupe, meaning that even though it has a theoretically high top speed, it never hits it. We modified the highest tier to charge so slowly that unless you're playing Desert Bus, you should never actually hit your top speed, which actually was a mistake originally, but because we developed the Honeycoupe and found out some of its flaws, we can now then apply them back to the Sprinters. Now I haven't quite done it yet, but I'm planning to add a very similar acceleration curve from the Honeycoupe over to the Sprinter, which should fix the problem of the vehicle, the Sprinter, being too good on straightaway tracks. Plus, if we're trying to emulate real life, cars begin to slow down as they approach their top speed. So minor oversight, but I don't know why I didn't think of this in the first place. Now having said that, I've been working day in and day out on this mod, so things like that were going to slip through the cracks. But now due to that headache, we finally have Corsa vehicles inside of Mario Kart Wii, and personally speaking, they are very fun to play. I seriously recommend giving them a try, especially the Honeycoupe. We tried tandeming the Honeycoupe on like Raceway, but for some reason when you're playing online, the other players default to like manual or something, so it doesn't show the Honeycoupe sliding around corners, which sucks, but again, the limitation of the game. Thanks for watching. If you want to download the mod yourself and give it a try, there's a Discord link down in the video description. Be sure to join the lounge, which is where all the updates and everything is happening, and where you could get the latest version. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff on your way out, and happy drift. And now, get back to work.
So long, Bowser, mamma mia!